I went to my first AA meeting when I was 7 years old. And I know what you guys are thinking. What the hell was in this girl's baby bottle? Spoiler alert, I was not an alcoholic at age 7. My uncle took me to that AA meeting because there were people in my family who were. In fact, there were people in my family suffering from many forms of addiction. Knowing that addiction would dramatically affect my life, he wanted me to be informed about it. So he exposed me to addiction from the viewpoint of an addict so that I could understand their struggle. According to the Center of Addiction, 40 million Americans are suffering from substance addiction. This includes alcohol, illicit drugs, and prescription opioids. 40 million. That's nearly 1 in every 8 people. Look at your row. On average, at least one person is addicted. 138 million Americans have a close friend or family member who is suffering from addiction. That's nearly 50% of our entire country who knows an addict. And yet, due to shame, people that know an addict never talk about it. They hide it from their friends, they hide it from their neighbors, they even hide it from other family members. People who know an addict go through great lengths to keep this secret. I know because up until this talk, I was one of these people. Drug addiction is defined by the National Institute for Drug Abuse as a complex chronic brain disease characterized by drug craving, seeking, and use. The key to this craving is dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in your brain that's responsible for pleasure. Totally natural and necessary function. Dopamine surges happen when you are watching a movie you really love, or eating foods that you enjoy, perhaps chocolate or pasta, or when you're having sex. Well, hopefully. When you consume a drug over time, it overstimulates the dopamine in your system, causing a euphoric effect that is 2 to 10 times the amount that your body is used to. This is the high. But over time, when you continue to consume drugs, the surges in dopamine really make it difficult to participate in life fully. This is why when addicts aren't using drugs, they complain of feeling flat, lifeless, and depressed all the time. At this point, it stops being about using drugs to get high and starts being about using drugs just to feel normal, just to feel something. An addict needs substances to reach the same levels of dopamine as a non-drug user. Addiction literally rewires your brain. Addiction is not a choice. This is literally a brain disease. So the question then becomes, if research has proven that addiction is not a choice but a brain disease, how in the United States do we justify putting addicts in prisons instead of treatment centers? I mean, would we put cancer patients in prison because they have cancer? Of course not. 65% of prison inmates are clinically addicted. Many of them were convicted for personal drug use, not even intent to sell. We put addicts in prison for the compulsive use of a drug that their brain literally tells them that they need to survive. But this is not just about an increase in the prison population. Addiction costs our economy a lot of money, $520 billion to be exact. This is the cost to our economy in lost work productivity, healthcare expenses, criminal justice costs, and law enforcement costs. And the problem is only growing. Opioid addiction alone has grown by 493% in the last 7 years. The US Surgeon General has declared opioid addiction a public health crisis that is both underappreciated and undertreated. Do addicts choose to try these substances? Yes. Were they coerced into trying them? Probably not. But does that mean that they choose an entire life of addiction? No. No one grows up and says, I really, really want to be an addict when I get older. They just don't. I've spoken to you guys today about a number of statistics, but addiction is not statistics. Addiction is the mother who lies to her family and friends because she is too ashamed to admit that her son has a drug problem. Addiction is the father who steals from his kids' piggy banks to feed his drug habit. Addiction is being called by the police to identify your sister's body because she just overdosed. These are not examples that I made up. These are examples from people that I know, some of whom are in this room right now. My uncle took me to that AA meeting when I was 7 because he knew what I did not know. My mother was addicted to crack. Like many addicts, she was unreliable, she was irresponsible, and when I was 4, she stopped caring for me altogether. Growing up as a child of an addict is a very painful and traumatic experience. You live in secrecy, mortified that people will judge you for this disease, so you do everything you can to keep it hidden. When I was little, I used to just think if I could just get more straight A's or more awards, she would want to be my mom again. I didn't understand how my mom could want a drug more than she wanted me. I recently re-met my mom after 23 years. People ask me, how do you forgive an addict? How do you forgive addiction? Understanding that this is not a choice, but literally a brain disease is a critical step. I wasn't sure how to give this talk today because the topic is so taboo and so personal. But there are literally 40 million Americans that are suffering from this disease. And if we do not start treating this like the health issue that it really is, we are further enabling a disease that is killing thousands, destroying families all over this country, and has a real economic cost. We as a society have to make a paradigm shift into how we are addressing addiction, one that creates more patients and fewer prisoners. Thank you.